So we're going to move away from tables now, and we're going to go into pivot tables. All right, so let's go to pivot tables and have fun with that. So we're going to jump back over to the PC side, and we're going to go into pivot table and subtotal. Let's go ahead and open that up. And we're going to be working with the same broad data to be able to do our pivot table and our subtotal. So basically, we have all this data here, and then we're also going to be working with a separate sheet that's going to appear once we create our pivot table. And then when we come back, we're going to do our subtotals on this. All right, so let's talk about what a pivot table is, in fact, and why you'd want to use a pivot table. So pivot tables are essentially designed for you to be able to do complex type of statistical analysis on it without actually being a statistical math wizard. So basically, you want to looking for themes, right? You're looking for things that are you're going to want to kind of combine your data to kind of look at it in different ways. You're going to sort of hold it up to the sun. You're going to kind of look at it 3-dimensional, 10-dimensional, different ways to be able to see if combinations of different data appear as a result of you moving things around, number one. But number two, as a result of you maybe kind of filtering things also. You're going to say, okay, well, you know what? Let's see how the central region did with quarter 1, 2, and 3 with just one certain product, that kind of thing. So then we'll be able to see, okay, well, let's see how quarter 2 did with only this particular product, all right, at this quarter. And then you can kind of flip it around a little bit. But it also gives you the option to be able to combine different things, not necessarily just as a column in a row, but also everything in one row. And you can see how things can kind of stack in a hierarchy. All right, you're going to see how it's really, really cool how you can do all these things. And it does it with just a couple of clicks and drags. And it's amazing how you can really get your questions answered that you didn't even know you had questions to. Because all these themes start to emerge, and you'll see like, wow, I can actually, I can predict certain things, or I can see certain trends and themes and things like that. All right, so working with pivot tables is a very complex thing, but a very easy thing to implement. So we're going to see how Excel really just does all the work for us. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and click anywhere inside of here. Doesn't really matter where. And we're going to go back into our Insert menu. And remember how we have Table over here? Right next to it is Pivot Table. And it gives us a little bit of an explanation of what it is. Summarize data using a pivot table. Pivot tables make it easy to arrange and summarize complicated data and drill down on details. All right, so that's one way of describing it. But I like to think that like we can see kind of different sort of themes emerge based on you moving your data around in a way that we can't ordinarily see it. Because if you look at our data right now, it's very two-dimensional. It's very flat. And we're going to make it a little less two-dimensional. So let's go ahead and click on that. And you'll see here, just like with our table, this thing pops up. And it's going to say, choose the data that you want to analyze, select a table or range. It's going to have that right there. Now, if you're trying to do this on the Mac, it may actually just do it for you automatically. Actually, it'll just, the pivot table part we're about to get to automatically just happens. This part does not happen on the Mac, from what I remember. All right? And then where do you want to put it? And we're going to put it in a new worksheet. Because we're not going to really mess with this, because our pivot table is going to appear on another sheet altogether. Very good. So now let's go ahead and click OK. And now this appears. And if those of you who are trying it on the Mac, you should probably already be here at this point. So now we're in pivot table land. We're at a place where we can now start to create our pivot table. Now, a rule of thumb when you're working with pivot tables is to always identify what we call your values first. All right? That's always going to be the thing that's going to help you. Like, well, what do I do? How do I work with pivot tables? Always identify what your numbers are. When I say values, I'm talking about numbers. When Excel says values, it's talking about numbers. So of all of these things, you could probably guess of the 4 of these things, which is going to be my values. Most likely it's going to be sales. It's not going to be my product name. It's not going to be my quarter. It's not going to be the region. It's going to be sales. So you'll notice here I have all 4 of my column headings here. Down below, I have 4 different quadrants that I can be working with. I have my column labels, my row labels, and my values. And I also have a way to be able to do a filter over the entire report. So pretty much this is like kind of getting your name right on a test and you get points for it. We know right away what we need to do first. We essentially just take sales and move it into here. So I can just simply click and drag this right into sales, and then I've got the beginnings of my pivot table. Nothing too impressive at this point because all it's done is just added up every single number on there, which is kind of impressive if you ask me, but it's not really doing anything for us at this point. It's not really showing us any trends. It's not really looking at the data in a very different way. We just have a big sum of everything, all right, which isn't really anything that's going to help us at this point. So what we'd like to do is basically move some of these things down here and kind of experiment. All right, we're basically experimenting to see, well, what's going to happen if? So I like to kind of, ask questions ahead of time to say like, well, what am I looking for? What kind of trends am I looking for ahead of time? But more than anything, I like to see what things emerge without really knowing what I'm asking. You're just sort of like on a little safari and you're going to see what Excel can do for you as you kind of spice to taste. I like to think about it like that. You sort of like what happens if I put a little bit of oregano in here, a little bit of salt, a little bit of sriracha, something like that. Okay, I like that. I like that. So you put that in there and then you balance it out with whatever you want, and you just keep experimenting. So this is kind of an experimentation that you really have very little consequences for. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move product into my column label, and you'll see automatically this appears, just like that. And I'm going to move quarter down into my row labels. Okay? And you'll see automatically this appears. Okay? It's like, okay, this is starting to look somewhat interesting. I can see I actually have some empty data here, and then maybe this isn't the way that I want to look at it, however it is, okay? So guess what I can do? I can actually switch these around because you know what? This might not be how I want to see everything because notice how I have all this data here, but it's a little bit too wide because guess what? All right, my column labels are all my products. So I'd prefer not to have it so wide. So what I'd like to do is actually just switch these around, and it's as simple as a drag and drop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this over here and then drag this back over to here. So I'm going to just drag this over here. It's going to look a little bit funky for a second. I drag this back over here, and now I can actually start to see things that I couldn't see before. I can see, oh, okay, great. So here's all my products and everything, and then here's each individual thing, and it looks a little bit different than what we started from. Right? I can now isolate things in a very different way. So if I go back to my raw data, you'll see here how it looks a little bit different here, okay? And it doesn't really communicate to me as much as something like this does. For each individual quarter, I have this amount of information, I have no information for this one, and it's basically kind of turning it on its head a little bit. Now, let's go ahead and add on region to this. All right, let's go ahead and add on region to my row labels. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this down, and let's see what happens now. Things are about to get a little bit more complex. So we're adding on another value into here, excuse me, another variable in here. So I just go ahead and click and drag that down to the bottom of product, and you'll see now what's going on here. Now it's allowing me to look at it as sort of a hierarchy. See that? I have each individual product with each individual region that corresponds to it, and now I can actually see what's going on for each thing here. Right? So I'm actually looking at a nice little hierarchy of things. Now, I'm going to stop here for a second because right now we're looking at this and it may not mean anything to you because this is all data that has nothing to do with work that you're working on. But if you're working with data that's relevant to you, this will just scream out answers. It'll just be like, oh my God, you'll just have these aha moments of trends and things that you didn't understand that was even existing, and now you'll be able to isolate different things that are going on. Okay, so this might look a little bit weird. My job here today is just be able to show you how to work with pivot tables. You understanding this data, that's probably not going to happen because it's all just sort of for the exercises. So I just want to put that out there, and I just want you to understand how to work with the pivot tables and understanding kind of what we're looking at here. Okay, so again, we now have, because we have our product and our region down like this, our product is sort of the parents, essentially, so we have Adobe, Alan Arkin, all this stuff here, and our region is essentially right underneath it, right? So we have these different levels here. Now let's just say that's not really how I want to look at it. I want to actually look at it more by region than I do for each individual product. And that's as simple as just dragging this up above this, okay? Because understand, this is like the parent-child relationship. Now region will become the parent. So all I do is simply click and drag this up. You see I'm getting this kind of faint blue line. I drag, I let go, and now notice how I have each individual region stacked together. So this is like if I want to isolate and identify, okay, what's going on for Central right now? Okay, and then how are each of my salespeople doing? How's each individual product doing within that region? I can then isolate it now by how they're doing by quarter. Really amazing, just a drag and a drop, and it's doing so much powerful machination of number crunching. I mean, it's really fantastic. You can see I have all this stuff here showing me all kinds of information, and it breaks down as it goes from each individual region, and it goes to there, and then da-da-da, all that kind of stuff here. All right? And you'll also notice that it automatically gives me the sum for each one as well. You can see that there for each one. Okay? Now, if you don't want to actually see all these things, you can actually click on the minus sign for each of these things as well. See that? So I can actually make that so they're collapsed or expanded. You see that? Now I'm actually just looking at the totals. So this is a nice way to basically save space, save time. People don't want to see all the minutia of everything. So it's really, really nice to be able to do all that kind of stuff, right? It just makes it just, nice for people who are viewing it. It's nice for you to be able to just kind of isolate different answers, things like that. Okay? So let's just jump over here to our tab now. And you'll notice here how I have another contextual tab. All right? We've talked about contextual tabs. We talked about working with tables, contextual tabs. We talked about charts, contextual tabs. Next segment's coming up, we're going to be talking about images and contextual tabs. We talked about headers and contextual tabs. So always keep your eyes open for contextual tabs to be able to get different options for you to work with. Okay? So there's lots and lots of stuff that we can do here. All right? So you'll notice here I have a few different options as I go in here, and I can actually do expand entire field. Right? Do you see that? How it did that for me? Or I can collapse entire field. All right? I made you do each individual plus and minus sign, kind of put you through boot camp so you can appreciate how awesome this is. Okay? And you can go ahead and expand, or you can collapse. You see that? And that's really, really nice. The fact that you can do that saves a lot of time, and you just get right to the point when you want to. Okay? So again, that's under options, under my pivot tables contextual tab, and then I have expand and I have collapse right there. Okay? So if I go ahead and expand it, you'll also notice that I'll have the ability, we're not going to do this right now because these numbers might not dictate it, but you can see how I can sort these different things as well. These actually are sorted to a certain degree already, alphabetically, but I could sort these the opposite way as well. So you have a lot of the same features as you do in normal data, as you do in a pivot table. It gives you all the options to be able to do that, right? I'm sorting right here, doing all these things. All right? In a minute, we're going to get to pivot charts. All right? So I just want to actually just introduce you, number one, just to this segment here inside the contextual tabs. All right? Let's play around a little bit more with the contextual tabs. Let's see what more fun we can do and just in terms of complexity. All right? So let's now go over back to this part here where we have our column labels, and let's take a look at some things that maybe we want to get a little more complex in terms of the questions that we're asking. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drag quarter over here so we have actually all three of them in one row label. Let's just see what that's going to look like. I click and drag, and I bring this down, and you'll notice now I have another kind of hierarchy here, which may not answer your questions for something like this, but it will possibly in the future. And I want you to just kind of start asking these more complex questions like, what if, what if, what if? Remember this kind of experimentation or spicing to taste and see what happens? I just want you to know that you can do that. And also know that I can actually move this around for each one. So if I just drag quarter up to the top, you'll see now I get a very different looking pivot table. You see that? Just from clicking and dragging quarter up on top, I now have a very, very different way of looking at my data that may be more of what I'm looking for. So it's really the kind of thing where you want to experiment as much as possible because you have very little consequences to be able to do so. And you might just find a lot of answers as a result of doing just a little bit of clicking and dragging. All right, so you can see we have all this stuff here for you to look at. We can isolate this, we can identify, we can all these different things here. Okay, what's that giving us? All right, now let's jump back over here to our pivot table tools, and I want you to see this design tab. And this is great. We already know about design, don't we? We worked with our table designs already. We worked with styles before, because guess what? This looks very boring. Okay, we want to make it look a little bit more fun, a little bit easier to read. So I can just go ahead and click on that. And then let's choose another one. Okay, choose another one. Okay, and also notice I have banded row options. I have all these other options here. Okay, you see that? Now it's looking a little bit more interesting, a little more colorful, but possibly also a little bit easier to interact with. Okay, let's try this one. Okay, there we go. I like that one probably best of all the ones I've chosen. And you see that? Now it's a lot easier to read because we have headings, and our headings have color associated with them. The whole thing has color to it. So we've now taken a pivot table that was pretty extraordinary in terms of working with analyzing numbers, moving them around, but now they're a lot more accessible. They're a lot more easy to read, isolate the information we're looking for, and we have everything right here. Just bam, bam, bam. And notice how we have quarter one, which is sort of like, if we look at a parent-child, this is like the grandparent. And notice how it's a different color. Grandparent, and then parent, and all that's children. And then we get to the other grandparent, which is the quarter, right? That's going to be the color that quarter one was. Okay, so there's a method to the madness to be able to isolate what's what. Okay? You'll also notice that my pivot table options have disappeared. All right? Understand that might happen to you. Why is that happening? Because if you click away from the pivot table, there's nothing there. You click back on top of it, all your options reappear again. I've seen that just scare the lights out of people. And like, where'd it go? What did I do? What did I break? Am I out of it already? It's like, no, you just clicked away from it. See that? Now it's gone. You click on it again, and it comes right back. Okay? So just understand that. Okay, and one other thing I want to show you is working with filtering. Okay? So filtering is very similar to filtering when you're filtering with just your normal data, but we're now going to kind of turn our pivot to a more deeper level of pivoting, where we're actually going to pivot it even further in terms of what we want to see as far as what we currently have. So maybe we might want to only see quarter one and quarter two. We might want to see quarter one and quarter two and only these particular products, or for this particular region. So right now we're looking at everything, but we've kind of shown a different way of how we're viewing it. But now we're going to see what it's going to look like, but only a few of these options, because we're asking different questions now. What's going to happen if we only have certain products or certain regions, things like that? All right, so how do we do that? Very simple. So if we come right on top of here, and we'll see that we have each of these different options, and you will notice that we have all these different, I'm going to have this top right up here, we have this little filter drop down just right there. And you'll notice here it says select field. When I click on this, it says select field, and I have product, quarter, and region. That's how I'm going to isolate these things here. So if I'm only looking for certain regions, I'm going to click on region, and then I can just simply choose which ones I do not want. All right, so I'm going to unclick each of these individual ones. So I'm going to unclick central and east. So then only north, south, and west are going to show. I click OK, and now I have quarter 1, 2, and 3, and 4, but I only have them for these three regions now. I'll do that once again. I'm just going to drill down just only to the north so we can kind of see it a little bit better. So I'm going to go down to region, and I'm just going to go ahead and only choose north so we can see how powerful this is. See, now only north is showing. See that? Really, really cool how you can just kind of look at your data and just turn it on its head and see it how you want to see it, and what you want to see, what you don't want to see, and also show it in a nice presentable way. But understand about filters, okay? You can filter on pretty much any one of these categories, all right? So just understand that. You can filter on any one of these things, and it's essentially the same process. You can go from here, choose whatever fields you want, and then do everything you want here. And just also notice that when you're in your filter, you can do all the same type of filtering that we could do yesterday. If you remember the filtering, we have our label filters, we have our value filters, all right? You can sort A to Z. You can do all these things here. So it's essentially what we learned yesterday. You can apply even to pivot tables. So it's really valuable information that we're just sort of building towards this as our sort of grand moment, but everything kind of feeds into everything else, right? When you learn one thing, it's not just isolated to that one topic. We can now use filtering and sorting and some of these other criteria on other things as complex as pivot tables. Okay? All right. So we'll leave it at that, and then we'll come back on the Mac side in just a little bit, and we maybe do some different examples. Now, let's talk about, I'm going to go to my options now, and we're going to talk about the pivot charts. All right, and this is the one thing that does not exist on the Mac side yet. I don't know why. Maybe they'll get to it in the next part, but they have not incorporated that onto the Mac side. All right, so I want to make this into a chart. I want to make it so it's going to be shown blah, 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 you know, however I want to show it, and just kind of take a look at it in a more visually communicative way, right? That's going to be our goal, right? Remember we talked about charts yesterday? It's all about visually communicating. So we only just don't have just numbers, we have the ability to actually present our stuff in a more visually appealing way with colors and all that kind of stuff here, all right? And you're going to see that charts are going to be very similar to how we learned yesterday. So I'm going to click on Pivot Chart, and then all I do now is choose the chart type I want, just like yesterday. I click on that, I say OK, and you'll see here that comes in, all right? And it's a little bit crazy because it's a little bit small. So all I'm going to do now is just say Move Chart, just like I did yesterday. So if you need some review, you can watch the videos from yesterday. So all I do now is I go to Move Chart, and I'm going to say go to a new sheet, just like that. I'm going to keep it at Chart 1, okay? And now I have this, just right here. Okay, so like magic now, I've taken my pivot table, and now I'm looking at it as a chart. So you can see here I have, let me just kind of zoom in a little bit. You can see I have all my different products and everything right here, and you can see how it's segmented out. It's only for North and each individual quarter, exactly how I presented it in my data. Okay, do you see that? Because that's how I had it. I had it as my grandparent, parent, and child. All right, but I also filtered it by each individual region. Okay, do you see that there? And I have all my numbers here and everything. So when you're working with this data and you have your own data here, this is just going to be magic for you. This is just going to be so powerful to be able to look at this and say, wow, I didn't know that this kind of theme could emerge. Now, what's so great about working with these charts, and besides the fact that they're just being really, really awesome, and the fact that like you can visually communicate your stuff really cool, you have all the same options as you do on a normal chart. I have now pivot chart tools. Okay, just like I had yesterday as chart tools, I now have pivot chart tools. And you see here I have design, layout, and format. All right, I'm not going to get into these because we did a lot of this stuff yesterday, but you'll see here the options are exactly the same, with the exception of this analyze. And you can kind of drill down a little bit deeper on these. So I'm just going to go back to here, and what we're going to do is come back to our chart, and you'll notice that this chart has a couple of different options that charts from yesterday did not. And it's these little guys right here. What's happening here is we actually have the ability to filter right here on the fly on the chart itself. So we can actually change the chart without having to go back to the original data. Okay, and that's pretty amazing. So if I decide I want to bring back another region, guess what? I'm going to do that in slow motion again. I'm going to click on this. See this region right there? I click on that, and you'll see now it's the same options, but I'm in my chart this time. Really, really cool. So I'm just going to bring up South, see what happens. Oops. Click that, click OK. Okay, and now I'm looking at this information. So I have North and South, just like that, and I can actually compare them next to each other. And I'm doing it right here on the fly, right in the chart. Just phenomenal, phenomenal stuff. Now I say, you know, it's getting a little bit too busy, and I don't really care too much about quarter 3 and 4. I can then just right here on the fly, just click on quarter, and I'm just going to go ahead and just uncheck 3 and 4, click OK, and now I'm looking at quarter 1 and 2 and North and South within quarter 1 and 2. It's really, really fantastic stuff. All right, so, and then also they make it very, very easy for you to do as well. And of course, I can go ahead and change my colors and do all that stuff if I want to. Okay? So that's the charts in a nutshell, and that's pivot tables in a nutshell. In a very tasty, very wonderful nutshell. So let's just jump over to the Mac side. And we're going to go into pivot tables and subtotals. Make that bigger. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and then go to tables. And where's my pivot tables? Where's my pivot table?
It's under data.
It's under data, thank you. It's been a little while, okay, thank you. All right, good. So we're going to go here, and then I'm just going to go ahead and choose pivot table. And then it automatically does it, as I told you, okay? So when you're working with, on the Mac side, it doesn't do the selection and then the confirmation. It automatically just creates it for you and then spits it out. And it actually puts in some things there for you, okay? So again, I know I did it a little bit fast. So just select anywhere inside there and then choose data and then pivot table. Okay, so once again, you can just click anywhere inside your table, go to data, and then choose pivot table, okay? And then it's going to spit out this thing right here for you. And then it tells me here what's actually happening. So we got to get a little bit of an introduction we're working with here. So pivot tables summarize data and reveal patterns and trends. Okay, I think that's actually a little nicer way to say it than we saw on the Mac side. Okay, it reveals patterns and trends. That's what we're looking at here. All right, so it tells you here about the pivot table builder, which is this guy right there. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And you'll see it actually puts some stuff in here automatically for me. just kind of maybe taking a guess of what you want to do. So this isn't really anything that we've seen yet. It's kind of more kind of two-dimensional stuff. But all we're going to do is simply drag and drop everything into here, right? We're going to essentially do the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and move quarter over to here, just like I did on the PC side. I'm just going to drag this over here. And then I have something that looks like this. And notice how product is sort of left out of the mix. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag that into here. I'm going to move that down below. Okay, and now we've got something that looks like this. So I have my region as the grandparent. I have my quarter as the parent, and all the children are the products themselves. Okay? All right, you see that there? And I can also move those things around. So I'm going to go ahead and move quarter up on top, just drag it. And then now, excuse me, region, no, quarter is up on top. Come on now. You going to work with me here? Let's see that. Okay. Okay, there we go. Are you not going it? Let's try it again. Being a little bit stubborn. I want to do it. So maybe you just, the goal is to maybe just bring them down. Maybe that's the best thing to do, right? Rather than bringing it up. It's not, doesn't really, again, different interfaces on each individual one, okay, on each individual platform. Okay, so what I'm going to have here is quarter, region, and product, okay? And that's a nice way to look at it here. And you'll see it automatically puts in the different style as well. Okay, so your style is going to be under this. You now have a new contextual tab on the Mac side, which is pivot table. All right, so the contextual tabs appear, but they appear in a little bit of a different way on the Mac side, where we have, you know, your data, whatever, and then as soon as you, if I click outside of it, notice how it disappears. Notice how everything disappears because I'm no longer inside of the pivot table. When I click back on top of it, not only does this appear, my pivot table builder, but also this new contextual tab called pivot table. Okay, yes?
So there's still a tab up there called table, and that's where I was.
Oh, right, yeah, exactly. It's a little bit confusing. I mean, yeah, my memory was that it was still in table, but it's not in table. They have it under data, and then it spits out from outside of data.
That's
okay?
great,
so,
thank you.
So then you can see all your options right there, and then now I've just changed everything. And then within it, okay, you can go ahead and make whatever changes you want. Okay, and you can also expand and collapse just the same way. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and collapse these, and so you can do all that exact same stuff here as you can on the PC.
And Kat, I didn't want to interrupt the work, but where you're getting some compliments online, and they're saying how impressed they are at how well you're following along to David and being able to pay attention and do everything all at the same time.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. And I've learned a few things from you as well, so thank you for that. Okay, great. Okay, all right, excellent. So, and here we are, right, which is more styles and everything, and just bam, that's kind of very similar to what we did before. And so we have all of our options right there. So, very cool. All right, and you can see here, it's a little bit hidden. It's not a yes or no, menu with our checkboxes. You can see here we have our row and column section here. That's where our banded rows and columns options are going to be on the Mac side. All right, it's not like how we had it on the tables. It's a little bit different because when we work with tables, we did see those checkboxes. When we're working with pivot tables, there's going to be a drop-down menu to be able to do this. Okay, it's really just a question of space, and that's why they created the drop-down menu here. So I can actually choose banded rows, and you can see how my options are going to change now that I have banded rows as my options here. Okay, so I can do something like that, and then it's going to do some craziness. Okay, I'm going to undo that. Okay, so we'll see how that works. All right, now, yes, so there is no chart option within here, but we do have the option to work with our filters just the same way. So remember, our filter is going to make a little drop down here. So when I click on this, we're going to get very similar options where we have our select field, and we can then choose, okay, you know what? I only want to filter out by certain quarters. So I click on the quarter from the drop down, and I just say, I only want quarter 1 and 2, and it automatically updates it for me. You see that there? And I can come down here, and I can see what it's showing me, just quarter 1 and quarter 2. Just bam, just like that. So what I would recommend, so you don't feel like you're kind of left out if you're on the Mac side, is you could copy and paste this, and you can extend this as a normal table, and then just make a chart out of it. The only difference is it's not necessarily going to have all those filters right on top of it, but you can still do it, and the data will still be live, so you can still do that. So just because it's not there as an option to automatically convert it doesn't mean that you can't do it. So there's a little bit of a workaround for you So you just basically treat the data like you normally would. So you can actually just create a chart right from this, and then it should be able to just do it right from there. So it's not necessarily a pivot table chart, but it's still going to be a chart nonetheless. Okay, so just because it's not there doesn't mean you can't do it. Excel still gives you a bunch of workarounds to do that. Okay, just not right off the shelf inside the pivot table section. Okay, all right. Very good, and you can see everything right there, and you can move all the stuff around exactly how we do it on the PC side of things. Now, in terms of our values and such, there may be some times that you don't necessarily want the sum as an option, okay? Because notice here we have sum of sales. If I now click on this little I over here on the right-hand side, inside of my pivot table builder, you're gonna see that all these other functions appear. Instead of doing sum, I can actually do a count, I can do an average, I can do a maximum, minimum, right? All these things here. So if I now just say, all right, I want to know a count of how much is going on for each of these things here, I can go ahead and say OK. And now I'll notice how everything changes then instead. So I have 25 inside quarter one, and then here's the breakdown of each individual one for that particular quarter. You see that? And all I could do, I could change that back to something else. Let's look at an average. Click on that, and then bam, just like that, everything changes. So this is where it gets a little bit more complex in terms of mathematical formulas, where you can actually do mathematical formulas built right into it and then have it immediately go into there based on what your values are and what type of formula you want to do. And you can do all these other ones right here if you want. Okay? So, and it's going to be the same thing on the PC side, but a slight different way, where you have this here, and then we have a drop down, and then we actually have to go to value field settings. So it doesn't actually automatically pop up. We have to go to value field settings, and then we go to here, and then we can go ahead and make those changes as we see fit. So we'll just go ahead and say average for this one. All right, and I'll go back to my sheet, and we can see it all right there. Okay, there's my averages. We couldn't see it actually in real time because we were still working on the chart. So let me just go ahead and do it again. We'll choose count so you can see it. All right, and everything changes right there. Okay, so lots and lots of stuff you can do here very quickly and with a lot of complexity, but hopefully with a lot of ease for you. Okay, so that's pivot tables. Now you know pivot tables.
Yeah.
And the audience are really going, it's funny again, there's always, they're putting in a question and then they're going, nope, it's all right, David's answered it.
Okay.
So
No
it's good.
sooner does it come in.
Okay.
Following along.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, so now we're going to finish off with doing subtotals. All right, now subtotals are also really powerful, and you're going to see how it works with subtotals. So let's actually just open right up before I even give an explanation for it. I want to actually open up to our actually we're going to work on the same file. So we're going to be going back to raw data within the same file, and what we're going to be working with now is a data set that needs to be designed to be working with subtotals first. So subtotals first, and what do I mean by that? We want to make sure that we have certain criteria, or I should say certain categories already sorted out and grouped together. So for example, I'm asking a question about region in this case. So I want to make it so all of my regions are grouped together. So central is all grouped together, east is grouped together, north is grouped together, and we know how to do that, right? We can do that with sorting. A very simple sort would allow that to happen. So if you have all your data and it's all jumbled up, just simply do a sort by the thing that you want to do it on. So if you're looking at subtotal of all your clients and you have a number of different clients, but you have a lot of different projects working with them, you're basically going to sort all your clients, bam, right there, and you have them all grouped together in a table. And when you sort them out, they're going to be together, bam, 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 all that, and it's going to be grouped together. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a subtotal. So we're going to ask Excel, we're going to say, hey Excel, can you please give me a subtotal whenever central ends, or whenever the region changes to something else, whenever east ends, right? Whenever north ends. And what's going to happen, like magic, is going to be a new subtotal row will appear right here at row 26. A new subtotal row will appear right here at 46, etc., showing us what's going on here, right? It's going to save us a lot of time, a lot of headaches, potential mistakes, and everything. So how do I do that? So very simply, we're just going to go ahead and click anywhere on top of here inside of our data. And we're going to go to data, and on the Mac side it should be the same thing. We're going to click on data. And on the far right-hand side we have subtotal. And it says total several rows of related data together by automatically inserting subtotals for the selected cells. All right, so understand the key word here is related data. The related data in this case is going to be the region, okay? And remember how I talked about that? They should all be grouped together and sorted independently from each other. So let's now go ahead and click on Subtotal, and you'll see here, it gives me a very nice kind of conversational way of doing subtotals, where it says, okay, let's do a subtotal. At each change in blah, use this function and add the subtotal to what? Okay, so at each change in my region, which is correct because that's what I'm concerned with, and this is what's grouped together, use what function? Let's go ahead and sum it right now. So I can go ahead and sum all of these. Okay, let's go ahead and sum this together. And then that's great because that's what we're looking for. And then add the subtotal to what? And it already knows that the most logical thing is going to be a sales because that's the only thing you can really sum up from all of these things. So it actually automatically put that in there. And the rest of these are, okay, replace the current subtotals. There aren't current subtotals, so it's not going to matter. But we're going to come back to this in a little bit and uncheck that. And then you could also do page breaks between each group, which I think is really, really great because maybe you want to have a different page for each client, for each project, whatever you're working on, and it automatically just block it out for you rather than have it all jumbled up together. Okay, so all we're going to do now, and we're going to keep this, all right, all we're going to do now is click OK. Very simple. At region, do sum, and then sum up sales. Okay, and then bam, it's going to do for each one. And then watch the magic happen. Click OK, and then we'll notice that right there, as promised, in row 26, it bam, puts in a central subtotal. Bam, right there, it added it all up there for me. And then bam, there's east, another one. And it keeps going and going and going. And it's just amazing how we could do that very, very simply. Okay, let's do another one. And this time we want to know the average. So now we're going to do another type of subtotal, but a different type of function. So again, we're just going to click anywhere inside here, go to subtotal, and this time I'm going to keep it at each change in region, same thing. I'm going to say instead of sum, I'm going to say average. And now I'm going to say do not replace current subtotals. So that's essentially just a checkbox. Then I click OK, very simply. And guess what? Now I have two subtotals, one for my summing and one for my average. Really like magic, really, really helpful, very quick, very slick. All right? So you'll also see how I have all these like crazy lines and minus signs and all this stuff here. And also notice how you have this 1, 2, 3, 4. This is going to allow us to actually expand and collapse. This is sort of Excel's way of saying expand and collapse for these particular things here. So if I start off with number 4, you'll see nothing happens because that's exactly where we are right now. If I do 3, you'll see it expands it out by both the total and the average right there. Excuse me, it collapses it right there. So I'm not actually seeing all the minutia beneath it. And if I say 2, it only does the totals. And if I do 1, it does just the grand total and the grand average. All right, so you have lots and lots of options here in terms of what you're looking for. They're still here. You can see that 27, 49, 71, right? It's doing all that stuff. However, it's all kind of hidden in there. So if I go back to 4, it all just expands all over again. Okay, so that's it. I want to quickly jump over to the Mac side of things and potentially do the same thing. So we'll come back over to here. I'm going to go back to my raw data, okay? And then we're going to go back to data here, and then okay, so subtotal is actually not in this section. You're going to find subtotal under data, under this part here. So subtotal does not exist in the same place. Subtotal on the Mac side is under the data menu, and then you'll actually see subtotal right here. So those of you who are on the Mac, just understand it's a little bit different. And we see here, we can still get to it, but it's just a little bit different. So let's click on subtotal. But here is where it's exactly the same. As promised you, that's going to be the main thing here is when we're working with the Mac and the PC, we can do a lot of the same stuff. How we get to it, that's always going to be a little bit different. So now we can say, same exact thing here. At each change in region, do a sum, and then add the subtotal to sales. Same exact thing here. The dialog box is exactly the same, and I just simply click OK. And then, bam, just like that, it's right here. Okay, and it's right there. All right, exactly the same thing. We even see our expand and collapse options right there. Let's do one more. Let's go ahead and say data. We're going to say subtotals. And then this time, we're going to keep it at region. We're going to do, instead of summing, we're going to do average. And I'm going to uncheck this, just like I did with on the PC side. I'm just going to uncheck that so it's not replacing it, just going to add to it. I'll click OK. And then there it is. just like that. Okay, and of course I can work with all these, 1, 2, 3, 4, everything right there. Now at some point you might want to say, you know what, I'm done with the subtotal, you don't want it anymore. Just understand you can always go back to that same dialog box and just say remove all. And then it's going to come back to where you started from again. So that's subtotals, and that's going to be something that can be super, super powerful for you and just save you a ton of time when you're working with a lot of the same things. You just want to basically know what's going on for that particular one, but still keep them in the same data set. So that's really nice.